Now, former President of Zambia's matter, staying with former President of Zambia matters, we're joined by Sophie, SABC News international editor. Sophie, we actually are awaiting, good afternoon, we are awaiting to have a broader conversation with the government of Zambia on the story that continues to capture the minds of not only Zambians but South Africans alike, actually the continent. This story, Sophie, of what we saw yesterday in court is reminiscent, or many would say, looks quite similar to what happened leading up to the burial of the founding father of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda. There was a court matter, and unfortunately the wishes of the family, at least his son, to have his father buried next to his wife was not to be. The court felt that they need to rule in the national interest, and he was buried as per the prescripts of government. Just talk to us about this matter now as it continues to unfold.
Well, you are correct. Zambia, it is not the first time where the country has to deal with this problem of a former president who has passed on, and you have a situation where the government and the family hold different views in terms of how the whole process should be conducted of the burial, and also in terms of what needs to happen with the body of the former president of that country. You are correct with former President KK Kaunda. His wish was to be buried next to his wife in a farm, and that's what the family wanted. I can confirm that because at that time, the family spoke to me also behind the scenes to say this is what we wanted, but now the government of President Edgar Lungu has taken us to court, and we will wait the outcome of the court. And indeed, the court in that country pronounced or make a ruling that he be buried at the Assembly Garden, which is similar to your Heroes Acre, and he is buried there. And therefore, now this time around again, we have a situation where the family of Edgar Lungu this time wants his wish to be granted in terms of him saying before he passed on he doesn't want to see the current president near his body or to preside over his funeral. And that compelled then the family to take a decision that because he died in South Africa and the government is insisting of burying him, it's better to bury him here, because then government won't have a say because they want to fulfill his wish. And then the government yesterday going to court, almost using a similar process that was used by Lungu's administration, going to court, but this time around the court in South Africa. And therefore, that's you are correct. It's not the first time. And I think the moment has arrived for Zambians to really look at how they deal with their former heads of state in terms of privileges that are supposed to be extended to them whilst they are still alive. Because it doesn't mean all the time it will be one party in government, and it doesn't mean a former president because he's not from your party, you have to treat him badly because he is the former president. He was a head of state, and a head of state is a head of state for everybody. A former president is a former president for everybody.
You know, when you touch on that, Sophie, yesterday when the family engaged the media in Hillbrow, where the funeral was to be conducted or held, they did touch on some of the issues. They basically painted a picture of President Hichilema, who they, according to them, has abused his powers and institutions to mete out punitive actions against his predecessor. They spoke about the aspect of having him stripped of his privileges, to say that he came into South Africa as an ordinary citizen. They felt that his pension must be stripped away. Away. It was stripped, and also he traveled economy. He arrived in South Africa as an ordinary citizen, waited outside for an Uber, and they say that now what they require of the government is to stand by their decision to treat him as an ordinary citizen, to say don't demand now when the world must descend on Zambia, don't demand a state funeral, treat him as the citizen that you treated him as domestically.
Yes, that's the argument from the family and his party, the Patriotic Front, to say because you took a decision to strip him of his presidential privileges, he is now an ordinary citizen. So why do you want to bury him as a former president? We still have to really get the Zambian government to explain how did they arrive at the decision to strip him of his privileges. Some are saying it was because at some point in time he was interfering with the politics of the country, showing interest to contest elections. We know that he was barred by the Constitution, so there was no way he could contest elections. Yes, he was still a leader of the Patriotic Front, even though the very same Patriotic Front, there were contestations in the party because some were saying it doesn't help to have him continue being the president of the party when he can't contest elections. And that is why there are other political parties from Zambia that I have spoken to who are saying just before he passed on, they were talking to him to say, let's endorse one candidate as an alliance so that that candidate can contest elections under one banner so that we can defeat Hichilema next year. We don't know because he didn't speak or release anything to that effect. They were still talking. So you are correct when you say the family wants the Zambian government, if this matter can be resolved, perhaps to apologize for taking those privileges. But I don't think the political party, PF, will agree because now you're heading towards elections. And now this thing is also embroiled in politics ahead of elections. But let's see between now and the next date whether there will be some synergy and sense will prevail in terms of all stakeholders.
I believe that we have our guest on the line now, so perhaps these are some of the questions that we can pose to our guest. This is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mulambo Hayimbe. Minister, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let's start with just your reaction to the court outcome itself yesterday, halting the burial of the former president.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you as well. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I was listening in. I hope we'll be able to clarify some of the issues that have been raised. The process of halting the burial, it should be looked at as an opportunity. First and foremost, of course, without going into any detail, because we are subject to the rule against speaking about court matters, active court matters. But it should be looked at as an opportunity for all of us to take a step back, because there's a time frame that has been given for the filing of prayers and pleadings. And I think all the parties are not precluded from taking this as an opportunity to take a deep breath and reflect. So I think for me, that is one of the key linings, silver linings to the cloud, as it were, in respect of the court proceedings.
But I take it, Minister, that you appreciate that this matter has captured the hearts and minds of Zambians and many from the continent because of the similarities that it bears to what happened with the founding father of Zambia, that is former President Kenneth Kaunda, that leading up to his burial, there was something similar where there was court action. So many would still be looking to get the position, honestly, of government in this respect. The family engaged the media here in South Africa yesterday. They painted or alleged that President Hichilema repeatedly abused his office and state institutions to mete out punitive actions against the former president. They stressed the fact that the president was stripped of his pensions and all benefits that are generally accorded to former statesmen. He arrived in South Africa as an ordinary citizen, flew economy, waited like any person for an Uber, and they say that based on that, the government needs to stand by that decision that they stood by in the latter years of the former president, to treat him as an ordinary citizen and not demand a state burial now because the world is meant to descend on Zambia for that burial. Your take on just their views?
Thank you very much. Quite a packed initial statements that you made there. So allow me to just break that down into little bits that we can all digest. First of all, I'll not want to go into very specific detail as to the mode of arrival and so on and so forth, because quite clearly, in my view, that would be disrespectful of the situation we find ourselves in. Suffice to say, from a headlines perspective, that with regard to the issue of the withdrawal of benefits, we need to put this into its factual context. It's very important that we do so. And the factual context is that we have a provision in our laws which is referred to as the Former President's Benefits Act. And that provision of the law very clearly states that should a former president go back into active politics, they lose the benefits, the emoluments that they ought to get. And it's a logical position that is given. If indeed a person is not retired, how can they be entitled to retirement benefits? So I'll generalize this discussion on this particular provision of law, rather than speaking about the allegations that have been made by the family, which we all have different views about. But we are in a period of mourning, and we must respect that fact. Let's give a general perspective. Former President Rupia Banda, who is also deceased and was buried at Embassy Park with full military honors, was equally stripped of the benefit by the previous regime, the previous government, that is the government of the Patriotic Front. And this happened, you can fact check this if you wish, on 19th December 2011. And I would like to read what was said by the then Minister of Information, Mr. Given Lubinda, who is Vice President or Acting President, as it were, of the Patriotic Front as we speak now. And please allow me this indulgence. I'll quote from a media statement that was made at the time. Speaking in respect of former President Rupia Banda, the MMD cannot have it both ways. So immediately they announced that he is their president, cabinet office, and the Minister of Finance must take note, and forthwith the calculation of his emoluments is frozen. This was the case with former Presidents Chiluba and Kenneth Kaunda. Dr. Kaunda was denied his benefits for the whole time he remained in active politics. So what is so special about President Banda? End of quote. This was Given Luinda that was speaking as long ago as 2011. What is the point that I'm making? We have a provision of law that kicks in when a former president decides to return to active politics, and it is on that basis that the emoluments are suspended until such time that the former president returns to retirement. And you will also note that in respect of the medical
Can I perhaps just interject there on the aspect of the law? Because we do remember that the Constitutional Court had barred him from actually essentially entering active politics in that respect, that he couldn't contest. So you're saying that in as much as the Con Court ruled that he couldn't contest, it was still viewed that he had entered active politics yet again, and that's why still the benefits had to be stripped, that it was immaterial, that he cannot contest per se.
The contestation of the 2026 election in particular is completely exclusive from the act of being in active politics. As you will be aware, being in active politics entails undertaking different activities that are politically related. It doesn't necessarily mean that it can only result in the individual that is involved in active politics contesting in an election. So those are completely separate matters. Does the former president still hold the executive powers of a president of a political party? For example, does the former president determine that the political party will undertake certain activities that obviously are of a political nature? I think those are the questions that are asked, and there is a provision within the law that determines what active politics is. But if you just take the 2011 precedent that was set by the Patriotic Front, it merely acted on the fact that the MMD had announced that the former President Rupia Banda was its president, and so those provisions of the law will kick in. But again, we have to be very circumspect about how we discuss these matters, because in my understanding and in the understanding of government, ours should be a focus on the situation that we have to deal with currently. Ours should be a focus on putting the former president of the Republic of Zambia to rest in a decent and dignified manner. And this was pointed out even in the case of President Kaunda that you referred to. In that particular instance, the family actually went so far as to go to court and seek the court's interpretation within Zambia on whether or not they can their own preference as a family regarding his burial arrangements would prevail. And this was in the case, it's a reported case in Zambia. And by the way, case law is precedent and case law have the force of law in Zambia. It is the case of the people versus Secretary to the Cabinet, ex-parte Kaweche Kaunda, in which, in a nutshell, the court in Zambia, the High Court, determined that the remains of former President Kaunda belonged to the state, and therefore the overriding public interest was of relevance, and he was buried at Embassy Park, contrary to the wishes of the family.
Now, Minister, it's not lost on many that there must be a balance between family interests and the interests of the nation, given the role that he took up as president. But as you say, this is a very delicate situation. There is a life lost. The family is mourning currently. So, and we understand that the relationship or the environment remains to a certain extent quite hostile. What attempts were made to engage the family before heading to court, though?
Oh, yes. As you'll be aware, the family and the government were in a consultative process for several days before the decision to go to court was made. Now, right up to the very eve of the intended burial date, which was Wednesday, there were attempts to continue with this consultative process. And some of those attempts were being assisted by the South African government as well, in an effort to find common ground between the family and the government. And so the decision to go to court was, of course, informed also by the fact that in any given situation where you have a stalemate on a matter of significant importance like this, sometimes it is necessary to go to a third party, an arbiter that can then determine where the balance of convenience should lie. And this is really what informed the decision. We have to also understand that government cannot be seen as a unitary entity. Rather, it must be looked at from the perspective that it is carrying the will and interests of 20 million Zambians on its back. So even the approach of speaking about the president, President Hakainde Hichilema, wanting to ensure that this process is undertaken, is probably not the best approach, or indeed to single out that it is government's will that this particular send-off happens in the way that we are putting forward. Should not be the case. We should look at the interests of the 20 million Zambians that would want to see their former president put to rest in the similar manner that his brothers that passed on before him have been put to rest.
Now, there's another element that is unique about this matter, Minister, that it's playing out in South Africa now. It's unlike the other two that you quote. And we are joined actually by our international news editor, Sophie, who has been engaging our government to almost get a position of where government stands as this matter plays out, in as much as we respect the sovereignty of a nation to decide for itself what must happen with its former president. But Sophie, just to rope you in, just share with us what now is the official position of South Africa, even beyond just the outcome of court yesterday to interdict or halt the burial.
The South African government is taking a neutral stand. They don't take sides. They want to see the parties engaging and finding an amicable solution. That is why the Minister of International Relations went to Zambia to address this. Let's take a listen, and maybe with the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Zambia listening, what his counterpart, Ronald Lamola in South Africa, had to say few minutes ago. Let's listen in.
With regards to the former president of Zambia, Dr. Lungu. It's unfortunate that the situation had to reach where a court has to intervene. As the South African government, we have always stood and said to both the family and the Zambian government, we are ready to assist the process of reparations. And you will remember that there was a day where his body was supposed to be reparated, and there were some disagreements between the family and the Zambian government that led to the halting of the process. And as a result, I had to engage the family and also engage the president of Zambia. We think as the South African government that from both sides there must be a compromise. This is not a matter that must be resolved by a court. The family must compromise on certain issues which they can engage with the Zambian government. The Zambian government must also do the same. And from my engagement with the Zambian government, they said they are willing to engage with the family to find common ground. So I hope that this halting may give both parties an opportunity to engage, find common ground, and resolve this issue amicably. It is our view that as a former president of Zambia, Dr. Lungu must be buried in Zambia. That will give him the befitting tribute and farewell. It will also give the Zambian population, its people, an opportunity to bid him farewell. And this will be irrespective of political affiliation. Remember, when you are a president of everyone, irrespective of where they come from, including all people of Zambia. So that's why in this matter, we're in solidarity with the people of Zambia. But we still respect the fact that in accordance with our laws, the family has got the say in terms of where their loved ones should be buried and so forth and all that. But as a former head of state, we believe that a solution must be found between the family and the Zambian government, and the South African government stand ready to guarantee any issues that can assist the process. And I believe that even the churches in Zambia or in South Africa can also play a role to help the situation, traditional leaders to help the situation where both the family and the Zambian government can find some form of a middle ground, compromises that can help to resolve this issue. So I hope that this period that the court has given will give an opportunity for another round of a dialogue that will lead to a peaceful resolution. And former President Lungu will be given a befitting state funeral in Zambia, where the family and the government of Zambia can agree in terms of how such can be run. So we continue to appeal to both parties to find an amicable solution.
There you have it, Minister Hayimbe. You've heard our International Relations Minister there, Ronald Lamula, at least calling for another aspect of a dialogue here, that beyond this period, maybe you could extend the olive branch to the family and move with the delicacy needed during this period as they continue to mourn, to say, let's find each other. Just briefly, is that the position of government now? Are you willing to again try for dialogue?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, government has always been willing to move in the direction of a process which is consultative and ends in a mutually acceptable way. And I think I'd like to adopt Minister Lamola's words as my own. He could not have put it any better. In fact, let me take the opportunity to thank the South African government, the President of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and of course my counterpart for being there for us as Zambia from the time that this situation presented itself. The South African government, beg pardon, has been very supportive to not only the government of Zambia, but to the family as well, and to the people of Zambia in general. I'd like to put that on record. I think it's very important. The court process, I'm a legal practitioner myself, is always one that if there is room for the parties to re-engage, it allows that, whether on a without prejudice basis or however else they might want to engage. And I'd like to say clearly on behalf of government at this stage that it remains our wish and will that we re-engage and we find the middle ground, the common ground, in the interest of not only the family who equally want to see a befitting send-off to our former president, but also in the interest of the people of Zambia, the wider interest of the people of Zambia. Minister. I might also go so far as to venture that it's also in the interest of the people of South Africa who have been put in between the family and government when this should have really been an affair for us. So we want to see this matter addressed and addressed properly.
Minister, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and condolences again to the nation of Zambia. And that's where we leave it. Thank you very much to our international news editor as well, Sophie Mokoena, for availing herself as we continue to unpack this unfolding and developing matter.